You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos.
Yo, what's up, everybody? Episode 65 of Here for the Truth podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Today, we have an absolutely amazing guest, as always, Chris Shelton, who has had an incredible life journey and a journey of self-healing and self-empowerment as well. And this is one that you're going to want to hang around for. We go deep into the power of Qigong and what is it and how we can all implement this into our lives in a really profound way. As always, guys, all our full-length episodes are available at heretforthetruth.com. You can grab our ebook, 55 Signs of Low Self-Esteem for Truth Seekers. You can download that either from the website or from growyourselfesteem.com as well. We're having a great time in our 8-week group coaching program, Rise Above the Herd, with our participants. Shout out to you guys doing deep work. Thank you so much for being here with the journey with us. Doors will open for Rise Above the Herd again in May, if anyone's interested in that. And our Telegram community is the place to be to connect with us right now. The link to our Telegram community will be in our show notes. Or if you're on Telegram, it's just at Are You Here for the Truth? You can find us there. Guys, without further ado, we'll bring on Chris now. We really hope that you enjoyed this episode. Chris Shelton is in the house with us today. Chris has dedicated his life to helping people relieve pain, reduce stress, and access higher levels of well-being. His motto is, if I can do it, you can too. Over 30 years ago, Qigong, an ancient holistic health modality that combines traditional Chinese medicine with movement, breath, and visualization, saved his life. Chris's belief in the healing powers of Qigong is rooted in first-hand experience. Growing up in a dysfunctional home as a teenager, he suffered a devastating back injury, which seemed like a tragedy at the time, but turned out to be a blessing because this is what brought him to Qigong. In a 10-year period, he went from not being able to walk to a martial arts champion to a renowned healer. Chris works with people who are ready to be empowered, reclaim their health, and enjoy life free from chronic pain. Chris works with all types of people, from Special Olympics and professional athletes to celebrities and everything in between, all looking for deeper meaning in their lives. Chris's work has appeared in newspapers and magazines and has been featured on radio and television. He's the founder of the Morning Crane Healing Arts Center in San Jose and Los Angeles, California, and the author of the book Qigong for Self-Refinement and the co-founder of the Qi Club and Qigong Teacher Training. Chris, thank you so much for being here for the truth, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me. And thank you for saying Qigong right, because so many people will call and they'll say, yeah, I'm inquiring about that Qigong class. And who's Qi and where'd she go? So thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
No worries, man. I'm a very inconsistent, basic, Qigong, whatever you want to call it, myself. One thing I've learned is perhaps how to say Qi correctly, I guess.
That's amazing.
Chris, to kick this one off, I'd really just want to dive into your backstory, your hero's journey. Obviously, you touched on it in the biography there, man. But can you give us it from your perspective, please?
Yeah, so I grew up in a dysfunctional home, and there's mostly neglect, some amount of abuse, and I started doing drugs probably by age 12. And started off with speedballs, which is heroin and coke. And then, but I was always very driven and motivated. My older half brother was in trouble with the law a lot. And so he'd go to juvie, and, they send him to the boys ranch. He escaped from the boys ranch. They send him to CYA. So I knew how to stay one step ahead of the law at the time. But I was driven. I knew I did not want, there's something that I wanted more. Even though I was using drugs, obviously, to medicate or numb myself from my reality, I still, got my Class A state brake license, my license for overhauling engines. I started becoming a butcher at age 15 and a half. I did my AP studies in art. But by age 18, my senior year in high school, I had my first heart attack from a meth overdose. And I had other health problems as well, too. I had severe digestive issues. To where if I ate like an avocado or any kind of fat whatsoever, I was in a fetal position an hour later or vomiting in the middle of the night. And I had all kinds of tests done, upper GI, lower GI, and nobody could really figure out what was wrong with me. And so what happened was that I lived on all kinds of medications and over the counter medications as well too. I also had severe sinusitis. I had severe allergies. I had OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and so besides having a heart attack, I had other issues as well too. So the doctor overheard the doctor say to my father outside the curtain in the emergency room that I should have died. But it was only because of my age that I survived this one, and I got a hold of some bad stuff. Well, being 18 years old, I said to myself, well, I've gotten a hold of some bunk stuff before, but nothing that's ever done this to me before, right? So I used it again a few months later, had another heart attack, this one less severe. But I was so ashamed of myself over what had happened before that I was willing to die that day. So I didn't call 911. And then fast forward, what had happened was that now I realized, like, oh shoot, like I'm going to end up dead in prison or both. And I didn't know how to deal with life sober. And when I was used to numbing myself. And so my mom walked in on me one night with a 22 rifle underneath my chin. I was going to kill myself, got me into therapy. And I realized at that point in time, like, wow, I'm going to end up dead in prison or both. And so I put myself into Taekwondo as a means to change my path. And then I started competing right away and in full contact competition. And one night before a match, I was training and accidentally kicked in the back. It caught me the right way and dropped me to the mat. And when they took me into see this doctor, they said that, Chris, if you're not careful, you might not walk, or things you take for granted, you might not have sex again. So they're pushing for surgery and those kinds of things. And so they led me to this other physician who was a friend of my mom's, and she had a therapist working for her at the time, and he was a martial artist. And now I think I'm about 20 years old, and he starts talking to me about Qi, and I'm like, yeah, right. The closest thing that I get to Qi is like Cheez-Its and Cheese Whiz, because there's no such thing as Qi. And so I had nothing else to lose. I started taking these Qigong classes, and this was over 30 years ago, and nobody was talking about Qigong back then, especially not that many people in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And I kid you not, after about 6 months of taking these classes, and there was only a couple other people in the class, there's all of a sudden the realization of, when did I stop living on the antibiotics? When did I stop living on the Sudafed and the Actifed and the Tums? I couldn't tell you the exact pinpoint date of the transformation, but there's all of a sudden the realization. I thought, man, if a simple movement and specific meditation could do this to my body, then there must be something to the medicine. So then that's when I started studying Chinese medicine.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit more about like Qigong and what it is and where it comes from and what it entails?
Okay, so there's different schools of Qigong. Qi is the life force energy that emanates through all things. And Gong is the skill in which we harness this life force energy. And in this case, to benefit the human organism. Now, like I said, there are different styles of Qigong. There's 3 schools. There's the medical school, which is the type of medicine that I practice in clinic, but also self-regulatory style of Qigong practices where a student could start learning these practices to improve their health. There's the martial arts school, so any style of internal martial arts, and that would include traditional Chen, Tai Chi Chuan, Xing Yi, Bagua, Yi Chuan. These are all internal styles of martial arts. And then there's the spiritual school, and the spiritual school of Qigong is not necessarily like an ism or religion necessarily, but it's understanding that you are responsible for your life journey and to cultivate this Qi. So when people talk about getting closer to God or to the Tao, whatever you want to call it, that happens when you refine yourself, and they call it internal alchemy. This internal alchemy happens by doing practices of Qigong. So not only will it harmonize your internal organs in your mental, emotional state and physical state, but regardless of what religious or spiritual belief structure that you have, you can't help but to grow that way as well too. And the way that I compare it to is like a guitar string. You put a brand new guitar string on a guitar, you pluck it, and that vibration is very coarse. You can see the vibration. as you tune the guitar string, it's still vibrating, but it's vibrating at such a high frequency you can't see it. That's the human's journey. So this would be considered the spiritual school, is when you understand that you are responsible to be able to resonate and cultivate yourself at a higher vibration. And then when they say to communicate with God or whatnot, to me, what that means is that you develop this knowingness because you've been able to quiet the mind enough to hear the messages.
Wow.
So when you talk about the style of Qigong that I teach, it's based upon the 5 element school. And these 5 elements describes a number of things throughout the multi-universe. It describes the 5 seasons, the 5 flavors, the 5 colors. And in this case here, we're talking about the 5 organs and the 5 major emotions. And so the style that we teach is meant to give people the tools to deal with their mental, emotional trauma. So going back to the story, the old story that I began with, those digestive issues in hindsight was my old anger issues from living in a hostile home. I repressed all that stuff because a lot of people don't realize that, like anger, for example, and resentment and rage or frustration actually attacks your liver and your gallbladder and shows up as various types of diseases. So the style of Qigong that we teach is meant to give people the tools necessary to not only deal with day-to-day stress and trauma, but also past stress and trauma that shows up as inflammation and disease. And in the process of this, then what happens is that you actually become your own superior doctor. What does that mean? You become so aware of your body, your internal organism, that you can prevent disease before disease sets in because you're so now in tune with your internal organism.
Well said.
So what is the power of chi at work? What is the healing properties? How can someone begin to understand and I guess cultivate chi in their life in a basic way and on a basic level?
So first and foremost, everything that's in our environment is an expression of chi or matter. This water bottle, the chair that I'm sitting on, right? It has a level of consciousness, and if it did not, its particles would dissolve into nothingness, right? So everything is an expression of chi in a grosser or denser state. And so very simple practices that I recommend to people that they say, especially for people that say, well, I don't know what chi is. Well, first and foremost, blood is your chi. We have a saying in Chinese medicine that the blood contains the chi and the chi moves the blood around the body. It's like yin and yang. They're not inseparable. You can't separate the two. And so when I'm teaching these classes, if I'm giving talks to trauma nurses and doctors on disease prevention, I can't come at it from a woo-woo point of view, right? I have to be very grounded in my approach. I have to come at it more scientifically. And everybody can understand that if your blood is strong, you have vitality. If your blood is weak, you are deficient, don't want to get out of bed, don't want to talk that much, have weak vitality, weak energy, right? So to understand this concept of chi, just think of it in terms of blood or fluids inside your body, because without it, we would cease to exist in this format. So the energy that manifests through all things is always in a constant flux. Nothing in the universe is ever at a static state of 50-50. It's impossible. And you could try this out for yourself. If you were to stand with your feet out, shoulders width apart, and close your eyes, you would feel your body gently shifting back and forth, because what is it trying to do? It's trying to find homeostasis, is trying to find that balance. And so what Qigong allows a person to do is to find that balance within themselves. And then we could take it always a step further. Well, we could always look at nutrition, not just nutrition from a calorie or a nutrient standpoint, but what are the energetic properties of the different foods that we eat, right? Because this also will benefit the organism or harm the organism depending on the person's constitutional typology. We could then take a look at energy as far as placement of things, which is referred to as feng shui. Now, feng shui is not meant as a cure-all, and anybody that believes that it's going to fix everything in your life, it's not going to. It's probably only about 10% maybe, but still 10% is still pretty significant. And so when we look at the proper placement of things, then energetically, is there a flow or are we creating a blockage? Same thing inside the body. Do we have flow or do we have blockages in our relationship? Is there flow or is there blockages? Because even relationships is an expression of energy. There's an energy exchange that always happens. So everything is an expression of chi, of energy. And and scientifically, you can prove it. I mean, the heart cannot beat without energy inside the body. The stomach cannot digest. The kidneys cannot secrete and excrete without this energy or this life force within all of us. And and when we go into nature, for example, when you look at the plants and the flowers, and especially the flowers that capture your eyes, well, number one, first and foremost, that's God expressing itself in its natural state. Number two, you're witnessing energy at its highest level, right? So everything is a vibration. Everything flows, and when there's a blockage, then it creates disharmony and discord, and and then when we talk about according to the body, the human organism shows up as disease. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, no, definitely, for sure. Can you talk a little bit about like the nervous system in relationship to chi?
Sure. So we have our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight. We have our parasympathetic nervous system, right? And according to Chinese medicine, for example, especially right now with what's gone on over the last couple of years, what we're seeing is a heightened state of the sympathetic nervous system being triggered. And in Chinese medicine, yes, the brain function is is definitely the contributing factor to the sympathetic nervous system. But according to Chinese medicine, the liver also plays a huge function as well too. So I'll give you an example. Of all the diseases that I see, back issues are number one. In fact, my second book that's going to be released probably around September this year is on how to fix back problems yourself, from the cervical spine all the way down to the lower lumbar. And clients were flying me around the country to see patients. And I was flying back from Skokie, Illinois, and I've seen these young basketball players that had a chance to play for the NBA, and doctors were diagnosing them with lumbar stenosis and saying that you never play ball again. And I'll get them up and running and jumping within 15 minutes. And flying back from Skokie one time from Illinois, I was pondering to myself, why is this? Why, back in the 70s when I was a kid, the only people that had back problems were couch potatoes of people that were obese. Nowadays, it does not discriminate against whether you're obese, you sit all day. I mean, obviously those will contribute more to that, or you're a professional athlete, or you exercise all the time. It doesn't discriminate. And I finally realized, oh, shoot, well, that sympathetic nervous system nowadays is being triggered all the time. When God developed our bodies, that sympathetic nervous system was meant and designed to get us out of trouble. For example, if you're being chased by a bear, or if your house was on fire, right? So what would happen is that they would take the food, let's say if you're digesting food, and say, all right, we're going to stop digesting right now, and we're going to transfer, the blood to the lungs, to the legs, to the brain, and to the extremities, so we can get out of there, right? Or if your house was on fire, same thing. How can I get out of there? But nowadays, it doesn't know the difference between being chased by a bear, your house being on fire, or running late for an appointment, or being afraid that you're going to catch some kind of virus, or being laid off of your job. So nowadays, it's being triggered all the time. And going back to some of these young basketball players, I think what is happening is that it's not only the societal stress, but it was also the stress of trying to get the scholarships, right? Trying to get into the right schools that they wanted to get into, right? It was a number of things. And so unfortunately nowadays, that when we look at our nervous system being overactive, it's because of the amount of stress. And then now you add in social media, you add in, not being unplugged from your devices, and it further compounds what the body is going through.
Yeah, it just seems like the back. I don't know, for some reason while you were talking, I got the image of like, I think the mythological figure was Atlas, like holding the world on their back, and I just feel like people have so much more burdens that they're carrying, because of everything you just said. And so I don't know, that's just what came up for me in that regards.
Yeah. And so when we look at the back, so when I see patients, so we have a very high success rate of helping people with all types of back disorders. And when we look at the lower lumbar, at least, anatomically, we're going to look at the psoas muscle, right? Because that psoas goes from the lower lumbar to your thoracic spine. But also, too, I'm going to treat the gallbladder acupuncture meridian, because that gallbladder meridian runs through the groin and contributes into the functioning or dysfunctioning of that psoas. And so that psoas muscle, when it gets tight, normally due to stress, then both sides are going to be tight. But the spine is held up by the psoas muscle. And so whatever side is tighter is then going to squeeze the vertebra, which is going to compress the disc, which then is going to impinge the nerve coming out of the spinal canal. And depending on what area of the spine is affected, then you're going to have things like drop leg syndrome or lumbar stenosis or sciatica, right? And but what we noticed is that the stress gets stuck here. In fact, that muscle, that psoas muscle, is a deep muscle. It's about the size of your fist, and it attaches on the inner part of that femur there, and it wraps around the back. And like I said, goes from the lumbar all the way to the thoracic spine. This is the muscle that if somebody was beating or attacking you, allows you to curl up into a ball right away. Why is that? Because you have to protect the delicate organs. You don't do a back bend if you're in danger, right? You curl up into a ball. Hence the reason why when a lot of people have lower back issues, they'll walk hunched over. Yes, their back hurts or their SI joint hurts, but it's because this darn psoas is so tight. Another part of the spine, talk about stress related, during this whole thing that was going on over here the last couple of years, we saw a lot of cervical issues in the cervical spine. And all neck injuries, unless you're doing jiu-jitsu, neck and shoulder injuries, unless you're doing jiu-jitsu and someone pops your shoulder out, I don't know, you're a pitcher, you pop your shoulder out, every single one comes back then to emotions that affect the heart. Every single case.
Mm.
And I'll give you an example of a case study. The guitarist from Nickelback, Mike Kroger, he did a testimonial for me on YouTube several years ago, and he was supposed to go in for neck surgery, and some of our friends from the TV show Celebrity Sweat had recommended that he come in and see me. So he flew to my office in San Jose, and so I said to him, I said, all right, what was going on 3 years ago? Because you could actually see the cervical arthritis in the x-rays, right? And I said, what was going on 3 years ago in your life? And he says what everybody else says, right? He goes, at first, I think maybe my mattress was bad or my pillow was bad, He goes, no, I think maybe the stress of being on tour or actually the way I hold my guitar on stage, And then he paused and he thought about it. And he said, well, actually, Chris, 2 weeks before this showed up, my horse died. So guess what? His horse died, took care of business like we all have to do, went back on tour. And then one day his body said, all right, you can pretend like that didn't hurt you, but it did. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then that's where the Qigong comes in. And he's funny. He said that I got rid of his arthritis in 30 minutes and on this interview, but no, all I did was I facilitated his body to do what it wanted to do, which was to heal itself. That's all I did.
Incredible, man. It's like, what is that process?
Well, what is the process? So let's say if I'm looking at a cervical issue like that, there's all the acupuncture channels and vessels that are on the hands that start in the face or the chest, that go down the hands and the arms, directly or indirectly connect to the heart. Your heart is the emperor of your body, or empress. It dictates how much of emotion is going to be expressed or suppressed. So the heart is affected by all the emotions. The particular emotions would be over too much joy, abandonment, loneliness, those kinds of things. But the heart also is interconnected very closely with the lungs. And so the lungs are affected by grief, sadness, sorrow, loss, shame, and guilt. The lungs also work with the large intestine meridian. The heart also works with the small intestine meridian, which also, like I said, come down into the hands. We have another organ called the pericardium. The pericardium is the protective sac that protects our heart. And actually, in my world of medicine, it takes the attacks of any pernicious influences first before affecting the heart. The pericardium is connected to, it's not an organ in Chinese medicine, but it's a function called the triple burner, which basically, if you think of the visceral cavity where all these organs sit, it's like an energetic network that allows all these organs to communicate with each other properly because they don't work independently. So anyway, so when I have a patient come in, one of the first things that we do is, well, first of all, I try to get to the root of what could that emotional trauma be. And it can be something as simple as, I don't know, the dog ran away, you got in a fight with your spouse or significant other, your boss, you had a disagreement with a coworker or something like that, suppressed it, or something you saw on the news and it upset you, right? So we try to get to the bottom of it. Then what happens is that if one of the ways that I could actually diagnose or assess, besides taking the pulse, besides looking at the tongue, is I could read a person's face. So every feature on your face tells me a story of how you think, your personality, what emotional traumas are still stuck in your body, and more importantly, what diseases are potentially stuck in your body, right? So if I don't start
all right, real quick, Chris, Joel, what's going on with Joel? Let's figure him out. No, I just like no, keep going with your story. I just had to.
Well, I was gonna go there anyway.
I know, dude. I beat you to
it. Yeah, it's really funny because just a little side digression since you said that. So I had to give a talk to trauma nurses and doctors from 3 major hospitals in the Bay Area, which was Kaiser, Valley Medical, and there's one more hospital. But anyways, so obviously the keynote speaker before me was a top brain surgeon from Stanford, talking about brain traumas and hematomas. And like, how am I going to compare it to this guy, right? I'm supposed to be going up there talking about lines and features that we see on the face that now in Western medicine, they're starting to agree, oh, that means hypertension, or that means potential for diabetes or whatnot, right? So anyway, so sure enough, I had some pretty hardcore critics in the audience when I got up there. But finally, what happened was, to seal up my talk, they called up a couple trauma nurses. And at the end of the talk, one of the trauma nurses came up and she punched me in the shoulder. She goes, "Chris, you have to have a filter on your mouth, man." And what had happened was that they called up the one nurse, and I was just being very sincere. I was looking at her, I said, "Well, you're a very giving person, hence the reason why you work in the ICU. But I said, you're awfully cruel to your husband." And the whole crowd just like lit up. And she goes, "Well," and I said, not so much in public, but behind closed doors, And so anyways.
Amazing.
So in clinic, when I have a cervical issue like this, if they're not giving me the answers, then I'll start reading the face, right? And my job is not to force feed them that they still have this emotional trauma or something going on. My job is to present them with the idea that there's still something there, and you can acknowledge it or not. It does nothing for me if you don't acknowledge it, but your body will pay the price for it. And then what we do is that we hit points on the large intestine channel. First, I do large intestine 18 first, and then I move down to 17, and I have them turn their neck, full range of motion. Now, if they have any kind of cervical issues, these points will hurt. In fact, when they look into the press, that's more painful. And then we do both sides, regardless of what side the numbness or the frozen shoulder issue is, or the cervical issue is. We do both sides just to try to create balance, because sometimes the affected side isn't the root, it's the opposite side, okay? And so then from there, but also what I do to have them be a participant in their own healing is as I'm pressing here and having them do this, I don't want them to just breathe through it. I give them the heart healing sound. And what I tell them to do is I tell them to inhale, imagine a pink cloud filling up into the heart. And then as they're exhaling, making the ha sound. Or they could do it audibly. So now they're making it into a mindful thing, right? And then I suggest, okay, if there's anything, let's say we do discover, okay, well, my horse died, or this is from trauma as a kid or whatever, then we focus on that. So then as we're making the ha sound, you imagine that circumstance leaving like a dark cloud going away from the body. Guess what? The pathology then leaves the body. So we have organ pathology and then we have channel pathology. What I'm talking about here is channel pathology. And by doing this, it actually will clear out the channel pathology. So what happens when someone develops cervical arthritis or cervical stenosis or whatnot, it normally starts off as a channel pathology first. And because now there's a deficiency, there's a blockage. Now the nervous, it can't, there's a limitation and maybe in fluid, nerve function. And the longer this goes on, the more deterioration that there is until eventually it shows up as something that you could actually see on an x-ray. And you'll see like the x-ray of the, the compression of the cervical spine or whatnot. And that happens as a result. Again, as long as it wasn't due to some kind of injury. But I'll give you another example. Let's say somebody has a car accident and then 2 weeks later they develop frozen neck or shoulder issues. Some people will say, well, it's because their nervous system, finally they got out of that shock mode and this is why it came up. But in my world, no. If it showed up 2 weeks later, it's because emotionally now that car accident is now affecting them. So yeah, so this is how we would deal with it in clinic. And then we do other things, maybe like washaw or cupping in order to move the pathology out. And then it seems like magic, but it's really not.
Well, that was my next question. I was going to say, like, when people talk about like miraculous healings, just having something resolve within the body or allow yourself to express an emotion that has been stuck, that hasn't moved, and then you allow yourself to do that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, my pain's gone. Oh, that thing that's been bothering me is not bothering me anymore. It's been bothering me for 6 months. You know what I mean? It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's really amazing because we're emotional beings. And, let's just go back to anger, for example. Anger has gotten a bad rap, but that anger is actually a good emotion. That anger is there because it's for you to fight for the underdog, to get out of a bad situation, or to create positive change in the world. That's what that anger is meant for. But if you're going home and kicking the dog, having road rage, drinking too much, or whatnot, now that anger is no longer serving you, right? But these emotions are meant. They tell us what our environment is. I have this new patient that they flew in from Arizona, and he's been sick now with all kinds of autoimmune issues. And it didn't make sense because he started off he was very fit and healthy, and all of a sudden started having heart issues. So, like I was talking to him last night, he said, well, I was very driven. I was eating right. I was showing up to the gym 2 hours every day. I was bound to get my body to this certain place. I said, okay, you have that drive. That's great. But emotionally, what was going on in your life? Because for you to all of a sudden, a healthy human being, a healthy organism, all of a sudden have these irregular heart rhythm or decrease in heart rate, there was something else going on that you weren't acknowledging. And we see it all the time where somebody is physically fit, eating right and stuff like that, but still dying of chronic artery disease. So it's I do believe in spontaneous healing. I do believe in group prayer and laying of hands. I believe in all that stuff because it's your intent that you put out there. But what's really cool about Qigong is that it empowers you to be the best version of yourself, right? It empowers you if you have some kind of autoimmune disease to transform it. And the cool thing is that you don't have to believe in it. Obviously, belief in something always supports what it is that you're doing. But what I recommend to people is no, just try it. Try it and see what happens. Give it a month and see what happens. Do the practices every day and see what happens. And you'll start to see these transformations happen, inside the body.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible when you think about it. And I love what you said about personal responsibility, and it empowers you. It's like you have the practice. You have to wake up, or before you go to bed, or whatever time you're doing it, you have to do it. It's not just, oh, let me just show up to your office, do a few things to me, which is great. Of course, it's important, but to be able to take knowledge and to take these practices and to do them every day is something that, no one can take that away from you. You have that, you have the power. And I think I think that's where it starts for sure. Something I wanted to bring up because, I hear about it from so many people, and something that I've navigated since I've moved to Los Angeles. I've been here for nine years. Headaches. I feel like headaches are such a big thing, and then different people have different reasons for them. Like, well, you're not drinking enough water, or whatever the case may be. So I'm curious from a TCM standpoint, and your standpoint, like, what do you think is the cause of headaches? And I know there are probably different kinds, um, but yeah.
Yeah. So the root of the headaches, and it doesn't matter what kind, or migraines or ocular migraines or whatever, you're seeing light, comes back to your liver being out of balance. And so yes, you have to hydrate, make sure that you're getting enough rest and doing all those kinds of things. But if you're having those, my first question is, how are you dealing with your anger?
Yeah.
Because different emotions causes different effects inside the body. For example, fear will cause the energy to descend. That's why you hear in a fight or flight circumstance, people will urinate themselves, right? The bladder releases, right? Worry, it knots the chi. So if you're anxious, you'll feel in this epigastric region here, you'll feel the energy stuck. That's because all that worry has now affected your spleen and pancreas and stomach, right? Anger causes the energy to rise. That's why, have you ever heard that saying? Because the liver has over 800 functions in the body, by the way. And one of the things that it does is it controls the eyes. And if you've ever heard that saying that, I was so angry that I saw red, that's true. It's actually a true thing. What's happening is the liver blood is actually rising up and hitting the collateral channels, and the person sees red. It's a true thing. So if somebody is getting angry, and they're hydrating and eating right and stuff, then we have to look at, okay, how's the resentment? How's the old anger? Because it's affecting you, and if you're having eye issues too. So if you're affected by bright lights that causes the headaches, or you're affected by loud sounds, which means that your nervous system is on heightened alert, we still have to come back to this liver. And we're not talking about a detox, and because then people say, okay, well, I'm going to do a liver detox. Oh, sure, you could do a liver detox, but let's do an emotional detox on your liver first. And maybe what we could do to support it is we could start off every morning with 4 ounces of hot water and a whole organic lime, and maybe a teaspoon of coconut oil inside that, and drink it down on an empty stomach. That will help to support liver health and aid in digestion. But let's do an emotional detox. Let's be honest about that. As they say in the 12-step program, let's do an inventory on your resentments. Let's do an inventory on what's going on, and be brutally honest with yourself as to what those resentments are. But every single migraine or headache, and no matter what kind it is, I see some severe cases. And it's not only that, but then we have other things of the nerve. We have the suicide disease, which is trigeminal facial neuralgia, for example, where the nerves in the face seize up, and there's no cure in Western medicine. And it seizes up like that because this liver is so out of balance. TMJ, when people grind their teeth, same thing, because your liver controls also your tendons, ligaments, and sinews. So think about it. If the liver emotion is anger and frustration, are you in fight or flight? Chances are you're in fight. What happens when you go to fight? You make a fist. Things contract. Things contract to get ready for battle, right? So if you have this repressed anger and resentment or old anger, then what happens is that the ligaments contract. So the person then grinds their teeth because now the mastoid, starts pulling, and that's what triggers it. So we see patients in clinic for that, for example, then we will do some gentle cranial sacral work, but then we go after the liver. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by it too. And even based on what you were saying, I would think people who have vision issues that are losing their eyesight maybe prematurely, I feel like, maybe there's a history of repressed anger there as well. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
True. And floaters in the eyes. And I know some practitioners will say, well, it's a yeast issue. No, you clear up. Those floaters are representing the stagnation in your liver itself. That's what those floaters are. Or flowery vision is another condition too, when there's too much toxicity in the liver. Because we'll see it so much where somebody is really healthy, but it still has their liver enzymes are high, and they have fatty liver disease, and they don't drink or they don't eat, they eat healthy, right? And so, and going on this liver too, since we're on the subject, when that anger is held for a long period of time and turns inward, guess what it turns into? Depression. So clinically, when we see people with anxiety disorders or depressive disorders, we don't treat this. What we do is we go after the liver, which affects the heart, which then affects the mind. Right. So it's a different way of looking at the body, because yes, the heart governs blood, but the liver is the controller of blood. So your energy throughout the day is based upon how well that energy or that blood is moving through the liver itself, right? So think about it. If there's a stasis or stagnation of liver blood from, it could be poor diet, combination, it could be poor diet, or just, having just this repressed anger for a long period of time, it'll create a stagnation. So if there's a stasis of blood in the liver, the heart doesn't get the nourishment that it needs, and then the mind suffers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the mind suffers.
Something I wanted to talk about, because it kind of relates back to what you said before about having a client who like works out all the time and eats healthy and does all these things, and yet has these health issues. And then you hear about these, sometimes individuals live to be over 100 years old, and they're just kind of like living their life, they're doing their thing. So I'm curious your thought on that. Like, I know there are people that's like, well, you're eating a lot of these like blue zone areas in the world. They're eating local foods. They're not surrounded by as many electromagnetic frequencies. But I think a big piece of it is we've gotten so much more isolated in the Western world. And so when you think about us being emotional beings, like when you think of older times and when people went through things, I feel like they had support. They're able to express more and release more. And I think it's something we're losing as we become more isolated with our devices. We're not spending time in nature. We're not spending time in community. Plus, we're being instilled with all this fear that like, oh, if you're going to be around someone, you're gonna get sick. All this, and it's just like it's kind of wild to think about.
Yeah, I kind of sum it up as a social experiment to see how we're going to come out of this.
Yeah.
I don't know how far down the rabbit hole I could go with this subject, but
You're welcome to go all the way if you want.
We do.
Oh, I can.
We do all the rabbit holes.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So yeah, I mean, we're seeing it. I'm seeing elementary school teachers that they're trying to teach these young kids speech, and the kids are not getting it because the teacher has a mask on. The idea that a kid has to be, if he's not vaccinated, has to go play by himself and be punished. I mean, the social norms have gone out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a father of 4 kids. My oldest is just turned 29, and I'm sorry, but and I'm not anti-vaccines. There's certain things. I was a butcher for 21 years, and as a butcher, you cut yourself, and if I cut myself severely, I'm going in for a tetanus shot because I don't want to get lockjaw. I don't want to have the side effects of it. But when you have something like this where it has not been tested, where there's known proof for a cure, there's known proof that there are answers out there, even if we're not talking about Chinese herbology and pharmacology. And you just really have to ask yourself the common sense question: why can't you talk about these things on a public platform? Common sense. And natural immunity, Fauci has said it years ago, that if you got the flu, that's your natural immunity. You don't need to go get a flu shot. All that stuff has been erased. And for parents that are pushing for their kids to get it, how dare you? How dare you? You should be ashamed of yourself. Because the kids especially, and I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, my mom, she was a nut. But one of the things that she did was, if I got dirty at all, she would bathe me all the time, throw me in the shower, throw me in the bathtub. And finally, the doctor back then, this is when doctors used to ask questions like, how's your family life? How's your diet? Those kinds of things. Anyways, the doctor said to her, what are you doing? Like, the only way he's going to build up an immune system is if he gets dirty. So if you keep on washing him off, he's not going to build this immune system. And so the same thing with this as well too. And the kids have been proving that they do fine with it. That their chances of even catching it, right, are smaller. And when we look at the death, now I have to pause a second. Is it a potentially dangerous issue? Yes, it definitely is. You can't deny that. In Chinese medicine, we call it a cold damp condition, and the dampness is what creates the horrible lung conditions. But in cold, in Chinese medicine, cold cold-induced diseases are more deadly than heat-induced diseases. So is it potentially deadly? Yes. But what really rubbed me the wrong way is that it's a cruelty against humanity to purposefully close and shut everything down, to isolate kids, isolate people, instill fear, allow the media, who we all know is who they're controlled by, allow them to instill the fear. And so many people lost their jobs. So many people relapsed. So many people committed suicide. And for some people, they will not recover from this. So it's a crime against humanity to know that there is an answer out there, and the powers that be chose to keep it from us.
Well, yeah, and I hear you there, and it's just like there's so many schools of thought on the fact that people have been being censored, for so long, and there's been so much suppression of different ways of thinking. Is It just blows my mind. It just keeps going, and people are cheering for it. But I want to bring back what you said before about the children. Um, and I was actually going to bring this up when you started talking about it. I'm hearing from people who are speech pathologists, friends with speech pathologists. They're saying all these 4 and 5-year-olds that have been masked up since they're 2 and 3 years old. They're like they can't speak properly. They're like drooling. They can't articulate words, and like we're going to be feeling this, like you said, we're going to be feeling this for years and decades, and the amount of the impact that this has on a developing human, for especially when you think about age 0 to 7. Like all these children that have been masked up, they can't get social cues, they can't build empathy, they can't read facial features, from their parents. And I remember that one video that went viral, I think at the beginning of all of the woman who was giving birth, and she had a plastic like saran wrap in front of her as she was wearing a mask, and then was just pushing the baby that the doctor gave her through the saran wrap, like not even touching her. And I thought it was like I was living in the middle of a dystopian movie, and you think about that, it's like, and my wife has done so much research on touch, and it's like for 2 years people are afraid of touch, and to me it's a necessity. It's not a luxury, to have
Right.
physical contact. And I think of people who like were fully, let's say, living in that fear-based state, and being impacted by media and believing the mainstream narrative 100%, who don't even have an animal to touch, who are just isolated for so long. I mean, it breaks my freaking heart to think about it.
Yeah, it really, I don't get political about things, but this one definitely, it definitely, because like I said, it's a cruelty against humanity. They don't care about the people suffering. They don't care about the unnecessary deaths that happens, and now the injuries and the deaths, and the fallout from the vaccines, the injuries. And we're creatures of touch. And that's like when a patient comes into clinic, I'm very hands-on with my patient. And what's interesting is that you bringing up touch. There's a group of scientists in Santa Cruz called Heart Math,
Mm.
and they've proved that our heart is the center of our consciousness. And did you know that if you give somebody a sincere hug, both hearts actually, both people actually move a little bit closer together? It's pretty remarkable. So this whole idea of touch and communion and community is necessary. And that's why, what had transpired of no more communion, the church is closed down, right? No more going to the gym, but yet we'll keep the liquor stores open. We'll keep the fast food joints open, right? So there's a mastermind plan, and I have to give them credit. Brilliant job of manipulating so many people in such a powerful way. And going back to the mass, they do all these tests that shows well, this lab at this is such hospital is showing that this is what happens when you sneeze. Okay, that's when you sneeze or you cough. But we're talking a nanoparticle here, right? This mask is not even designed to stop. It's an aerosol. It's been proven, scientifically proven. It's an aerosol disease. It's not a contact disease, and it's less than a nanoparticle. The masks do not work at that level. So it's and it's funny. It's become a social norm in certain parts, like in the Bay Area. I would say that they're more uptight than they are down here. Even after they lifted the mandates up there, I still see a lot of people walk around with double masks, and it makes me kind of laugh because they'll wear two different colors, so that way that they're wearing two, right?
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's bizarre to me, and so yeah, we did a video at the beginning of this, and it's on YouTube called Virus Stop. And they didn't censor it, but they pushed it down to where it's hard to find. And in that video, I talk about the Qigong practices that will benefit you, what vitamin supplements to take, what herbal remedies to take depending on the level of the symptoms, and then also what foods to eat and what foods are contraindicated, and also what foods are contraindicated based upon symptoms. And the whole idea, and what's funny is I didn't even mention the word of the virus because I didn't want to give it any credit, right? Mm-hmm. And it still got shoved down, quite a bit. But yeah, so those kinds of things, common sense says, well, why would they do that? Why would they do that? And one of my affluent clients in the Bay Area there, he goes, well, there has to be censorship because what happens if somebody says to inject bleach in your arms? And I said, well, first of all, there has to be a dialogue, right? There has to be a dialogue on that. And you have to have common sense.
Yeah.
Common sense, right? Is this true or not? But let's have a discussion on the effectiveness of doing that technique. Not censor it. That's one of the beautiful things about this country. And at the rally yesterday, that's one of the things that they're talking about is let's have a dialogue. Let's, if you want to be vaccinated because you feel safer, if you want to stay at home, let that be your choice. But don't make it a mandate, an illegal mandate across the board. Because just like I tell people with nutrition, you can't apply the same thing to everybody because we're all like snowflakes. What does that mean? We're all different. So you have to do it according to your constitution and according to what is going on with you. Same thing with this.
Some of them are more snowflake than others.
Yes, that is for sure. That is for sure. Yeah, and we didn't see many of those at the rally yesterday. That's for sure. So
definitely.
Oh man, there's the logical fallacies with the entire narrative is endless. We could go on forever about that for sure, man. The entire charade is just beyond ridiculous. There's no doubt about that. One thing I want to ask you, I want to just bring this back to Qi quickly. So as I mentioned at the start, I'm a very inconsistent practicer of Qigong. So when, for example, if you're making a Qi field or whatever it might be, why sometimes is that feeling more potent than others? What's the drivers for that, for example? As in the Qi that's actually felt between your hands when you decide to commit to a practice for a period of time?
Well, that's a really great question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that question before. Okay, so I'm going to bring it back to your kidneys. So your kidneys are your battery for your life. They will dictate how long your life will be. And so at the time of conception between God, your parents, and your environment predetermines this kidney well. Okay, so when you go back to doing a practice like this where you're trying to feel the Qi, depending on the strength, now there's two main organs that play a role in this. One is the strength of the kidneys, which is called your pre-heaven essence, and then our post-heaven essence, which is our stomach, okay? So there's something called our upright Qi. There's only one Qi, right? Mm-hmm. But what's clever about Chinese medicine is that there's different names of different types of Qi based upon its function, which is so clever.
Is this like Jing and Shen?
Yeah, your Jing Qi. Yeah, so your Jing, your upright Qi. Well, your Jing, right? It has to come from, okay, we have our original Qi, But the Jing Qi has to be replenished from our nutritive Qi, also referred to as our Gu Qi. So the food that we put into our stomach. So there's a couple of things. One, how is your diet? Or maybe what did you eat? Or what did you eat a couple of days before? Two, how is your sleep? Was it a restful night's sleep? Did you exert? Because now your kidneys, like I said, of all the internal organs of the body, the kidneys are the only organ that tends to always be deficient. Now, its counterpart organ, the bladder, can have an excess condition, but the kidneys themselves are always deficient. So it's like a battery. As we age, this battery naturally declines. And so the kidneys control everything: your bones, your marrow, your reproductive system, your brain, all the glands inside your body. It's the basis for all the fluids inside your body. It's the basis for all the heat inside your body. And so there's certain things that will deplete this essence faster. One, it's burning the candles at both ends. Two, not getting enough sleep. Three, too much stress. So and especially where there's adrenaline dumps. So if you're a police officer, for example, those adrenaline dumps will zap the kidneys, especially if you're having the adrenaline dumps and you're working a night shift. The other things too will obviously be by poor diet or drugs and alcohol. Believe it or not, they actually will say too much sex actually will create or too many orgasms will deplete this as well too. So it all depends on that. So having too many orgasms. And what's crazy is that in the clinical textbooks, I think Giovanni is one of the main acupuncture authors. And one of his textbooks, I swear if it said between like age 16 and 20, I think it was like 7 or 8 orgasms a day was okay, and then obviously I don't know if that's really true or not, because I don't know how many people would be able to function in a day, right? Just, you wouldn't ever leave the room. But if you break down boxers, for example, you talk to a lot of professional fighters, they'll tell you that maybe a month beforehand, they won't, for at least, 4 weeks beforehand, they won't. So maybe they don't know it's from that, but obviously there's something connected to it. So
I remember hearing all about that, reading all about it. And I like 8 years ago, I ran the half marathon in Long Beach, and like 3 weeks before, or maybe it was 9 years ago, I forget. I was with a lady, and I was like, no, sorry, I got to run the marathon in 3 weeks, so I got to save my chi.
There you go. So yeah, I mean, I think so the best example I get is the next time you're feeling like a flu bug is coming on and you're getting sick, have a couple of orgasms and see if you get sicker. Chances are you will. And because again, now here's a different physiology, because now we're talking about the kidney and lung network and its communication, and our lungs are responsible for our immune health. It's one of the organs responsible. And so if this pathogen is already entering into the body, and there's already a fight going on between the internal and the external to push the pathogen out, then you have the release. Now you've weakened its ability to further protect the body. So, but yeah, so I think that was a long-winded answer to why sometimes if you do that chi ball exercise, why sometimes you feel more and sometimes you don't. So it's really based upon how you're sleeping, what your food was like, and then your sensitivity. But the more you practice, though, it should get stronger. And what I tell people too when they practice qigong is that, let's say you have some really amazing experiences, or maybe, I don't know, you get hot or something, or have certain tingling sensations. I recommend that people don't identify with those sensations, because it could actually limit their development. Because sometimes you may feel hot or tingling or see colors or auras, I don't know, whatever. But if you attach yourself to it and all of a sudden it shifts, then you may think, oh, wow, it must not be working anymore. And it's not necessarily that it's not working anymore. It just means that it's gone to a deeper level.
Yeah, definitely answers it. Thank you so much. I want to ask you, have you ever looked into or heard of Germanic healing knowledge or German new medicine at all?
No, I have not.
Yeah, it's just interesting. There's lots of like correlations. I mean, initially when we were talking about, for example, the back dysfunction and stuff like that, and for example, trauma and conflict being a potential causation of those symptoms. But what if we took that to what might call pathogen or disease, be it flu or whatnot, also as a result of perhaps conflicts and traumas that have happened in the past. And that's kind of what that modality looks at. Mm.
Hmm. Well, it makes sense because so what happened? We had a lot of fear over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Again, going back to the communication between the lungs and the kidney network, if the fear zaps the kidney essence, then you're going automatically weaken the lungs' ability to protect ourselves, and you're going to now start to impair our lymphatic system and such as well too. So there's a definite connection between that. So that's why I would suggest when we started the Qi Club during the pandemic, and because and initially what started it, yeah, initially what started it is that my friend here in Hollywood, his name is Eric the Trainer. He's a Hollywood physique expert, and so it was because of him, I got to go on tour with Def Leppard and Journey. I was treating them on tour and some fun stuff like that. So he's an amazing guy. He's this massive Jewish guy with long blonde hair, but he has such a huge heart. He's so charismatic. And anyway, so when everything locked down, he started this thing called the Sleep Ninja workout. And so it was on Zoom, it was 5 days a week. And he get these different celebrities on there that talk about, or celebrities or athletes or, singers, songwriters, whatever, and talking about different things that they're up to during the workouts, right? So anyways, he was doing a 7-day challenge, like the 7-day pillow challenge, where you had to be in bed by 9 o'clock, or the 7-day curfew challenge, you had to stop eating by 7 p.m., right? And so he did the 7-day Qi challenge, and it turned out to be such a huge success that we continued it for free, teaching it 3 days a week. And it really helped people during some dark times, because people that were stuck in that fear place, or they gave them a tool, and then with also a network of people that are also doing these same practices at the same time, that really helped to empower them. And before once we saw that things were opening back up again, then we started the Qi Club itself. And we didn't realize the impact that it had on so many people from around the world until we transitioned, because then we started getting all these beautiful emails and letters and donation checks sent to us, thanking us for how it helped them through this hard time. And so we've continued it on. And when I'm teaching the class, it's every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 8 to 8:30 a.m. My wife teaches on Monday and Wednesday. I teach on Tuesday and Thursday. When she teaches, she incorporates a little bit of Pilates with the Qigong. For myself, I stick mainly with the Tai Chi or the Qigong itself. And but as I'm doing a movement or whatever, I'm reminding my audience, this is what this practice is for. There's not one practice that I teach in Qigong that is just for relaxation. Relaxation is a byproduct. Every single practice that I teach is meant to do something medicinally inside the body, every single one. So I remind people of, okay, well, this is how we tell there's a spleen disharmony, and this is how we tell there's a kidney disharmony or whatever. And so what it does is it actually allows people to really, again, self-empowerment, and even for the people that are very afraid, right, they're on there, again, I always remind people of self-empowerment. And I see people on social media that are on the Qi Club, and I see them posting really negative things, So instead of addressing it to them on their social media platform, I gently bring it up during the Qi Club. Like, maybe as we want to clear out our own depression, what we're putting out there on social media to the world, we should be aware of, because it has an impact, right? Talk about energy, it has an energy ripple, right? It affects people, and it will resonate with other people that are at that same energetic frequency, right? So
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. And I think especially as we come out of this, and who knows what lies ahead on the horizon. But it's like people get so caught up in figuring things out, spending all this time on the internet and sharing all this stuff, all the horrible things that are going on in the world and what may happen and what may come. And it's like, well, what are you doing to take care of yourself and put yourself in the position to have more peace and more joy in your life? And it doesn't mean stick your head in the sand and be like, la 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 la, everything's all good. But it's just like having some intelligence and awareness around it. Like, okay, do you need to spend 5 hours on your phone, or like there's some trees outside, maybe go hug a few of them?
yeah, right. Yeah, there's so many other things that we can be doing, and so it's really it's up to the individual, and you
Mhm.
know. And we also saw this too, where people that really lost their faith, whatever they're studying Christianity, Catholicism, Hindus, what, so many people, I had to remind them that I knew had a certain faith that they studied. Remember, you have to go back to your faith, because if you have true faith, then nothing can penetrate that. Nothing can. But if you walk away from that, if you walk away from your studies and you walk away from your practices, and you allow this outside forces to invade you, then you now have weakened yourself. And
Yeah.
so, and we have a saying in Chinese medicine that our thoughts are louder than thunder in heaven. So what we're thinking about, and we talk about this in the quantum physics, what we're thinking about, we're manifesting, or we're drawing into our life at a certain level, right? And so we have to really look at that. So if you're living in fear, my wife and I, we joked around that we were living in a bubble through this whole thing, because we still traveled all over the place. I mean, we still lived
Yeah.
our life like nothing was happening. Now, I was my clinical practice quadrupled because I was seeing so many sick patients. But like I would tell them, where doctors and physicians were sending their patients home and saying, "Take an Advil, don't come in," I was telling my patients, "Come in.
Mhm.
I'm not going to get sick. You are not going to get me sick." And so, it's a strong conviction that I have, and so they would come in. I would not turn them away, because if I knew I have a remedy that help keep them from suffering, or possibly help keep them from dying, I'm going to give them that remedy, and I'm going to treat them. But then also,
Yeah.
I'm going to teach them how to take care of themselves too.
Exactly. And like you brought up faith, and it's like I have such a deep, deep faith in the intelligence of my own body, and I don't have a fear of symptoms or fear of disease, just through my own education and the way I live my life. And just like you, my wife and I mean, yeah, maybe some little things changed in terms of like something to do with community and certain travels, but like we nothing changed in our life. We kept doing what we are doing, kept spending time with people, kept bringing people together, and again, it comes down to the individual and where they're at and what where their belief systems lie, and their views of the mind and the body, etc.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's good to be informed as to what's going on, but you look at it from different angles too, right? Don't just look at it from one narrative. Look at it from different angles. Um, a lot of times my wife has no idea what's going on in the world, but I kind of want to know, because if I see a mushroom cloud in the horizon, I kind of want to be aware that there's possible things going down, But the difference would be those that I don't obsess over it. I don't spend hours on it. I have a limited amount of time that I give myself just to be informed enough to know what's happening, or to be aware, and that's it. But I don't let it affect me on a cellular level.
Yeah.
Um, it's really important not to allow it to affect you at that level.
Yeah, and I think that's the key too, because I'm similar in that regards. Like I like having the knowledge, I like having the knowing, but it's like, is it really going to impact me from a really deep nervous system level? And if I feel it even getting close to that because I'm spending too much time, I have to do something. I just have to come back to center, do a practice. You know, turn on like put my phone in my drawer, or do something, or go outside.
Yeah, but that's self-awareness and self-knowledge to know when you're getting to that point when
Yeah.
something needs to shift, as well.
Mhm.
I want to ask you another question. Can you please talk about the small heavenly cycle, or the microcosmic orbit, whatever you might want to call it? This is a breathing practice that I've been kind of tampering with and playing with in my own life, but I'd like to hear it from the master.
Okay, so we have 12 major acupuncture vessels in the body. We have what are referred to as 8 extraordinary vessels in the body. And 2 of those 8 vessels is called the governing vessel, that comes up from the perineum, comes up over the top of the head, actually ends right here. Then we have the conception channel that comes from around the perineum, and then rises up and actually ends underneath the tongue here. So these 2 major reservoirs. The philosophy is that once you, obviously energy is running through these 2 major reservoirs, but the 12 major acupuncture meridians that feed into the 12 regular organs, at some point, those channels cross over those 2 major channels. So the theory is that once you open up these 2 vessels by doing the small heaven breathing, also referred to as Jupiter's orbit meditation, then it's like a reservoir. You fill up the reservoir, then what happens? Then the excess water or energy then fills into the smaller reservoirs, which is the 12 regular acupuncture meridians, which then feeds into their corresponding organs. So from a health standpoint, that's one of the things. The other thing too is that it also stimulates that central nervous system, right? Because what we're doing is we're inhaling up the spine, up over the top of the head, exhaling down through the front. Now, the other thing too that we purposely do is we mindfully gently place the tip of the tongue on the roof of the mouth behind the teeth as if saying the letter N, lightly squeezing the anal sphincter muscle and relaxing the body. The reason why for this is that gently squeezing the anal sphincter muscle actually closes the lower gate. By placing the tongue on the roof of the mouth will close and connect the upper gate. So this is a very powerful meditation. It's a simple meditation. And the microcosmic orbit, they say it takes about, it takes about 90 days or 100 days to open up these two channels. I know for myself, it took me longer. I didn't feel it for the longest time. But suddenly one day, what I did was I felt this energy or this pressure going up my spine. And then I felt something open. And ever since then, now when I place the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth behind the teeth, my tongue vibrates. That's the pulsation. There's a pulsation that happens. And so this channel, when these two channels open, then if you do this practice enough, now this method here, going up the spine and down the front, that's called the fire cycle. The water cycle is when we reverse it and go the opposite direction. And then there's a more complicated cycle called the wind cycle. But the most common method that's taught is called the fire cycle, which we inhale up the back. But the cool thing is that once the energy starts to move, your breath, you'll find, will not keep up with the movement of the qi. The qi will move on its own. So a misconception is that when I inhale, the hands have to come up, or the qi has to come up. When I exhale, the hands have to come down, or I have to exhale. That's a misconception. That's just when we're first teaching people Qigong, we teach it that way. So in that way, they can help to navigate this, their imagination more to connect with the practice, right? But like Master Chen Xiao Wang from our family, from the Chen system of Tai Chi from China, like he said at a workshop years ago, he said, well, think of a boxer. A boxer in one breath could throw 5 or 6 punches. He's not going, right?
Yeah.
So in one, you could throw it. So the same thing with this too. So at first we teach people inhale up the spine, exhale. You can actually use your hands. We call it Gong stroking his beard, where we inhale up the back and then exhale down the front. And this practice, like I said, is very powerful. There's powerful points. This point right here, GV26, governing vessel 26. If somebody passes out or becomes unconscious, if you massage here gently, you'll bring them back to consciousness just like that. And you don't even have to be some Qigong master or anything like that. Likewise, if you hit somebody with a ridge hand here, you'll kill them. Yeah. When I was on tour with Def Leppard, one of the head security guys, this guy, he showed me, because his main thing kind of reminds me of like a killer whale. You know how a killer whale will stalk its prey, that all of a sudden you'll watch this guy backstage in the crowd, and he gets sensed where there's going to be something. And like he says, my job, I'm not going to stand there and box with somebody. My job is just to de-escalate the situation as quickly as possible. I wish I had the picture available on my computer, because there's a picture of me where he's holding me against the wall with one finger like this. That's how powerful that point is. So anyways, so the more that you practice this, then what happens is then it starts to really open you up. And then if you believe in cultivating for internal power and stuff like that, let's say you decide to go into internal martial arts, or more importantly, let's say if you decide to use these practices for spiritual development, this is one very simple practice that is used for spiritual development. And the more that you do it, the more time you spend with it, the more that you'll get from the practice. Then what we have, then we could do a smaller orbit from there, which would be as energy comes down through the front, we go to the perineum, which is the acupuncture point between the sex glands and anal sphincter muscle. energy, inhale up the spine to the Ming Men, which is the acupuncture point between the right and left kidney. Then from there, then the energy goes through the body, exits right below the belly button and does a circle. Then you come around. So you do a smaller circle through the small area here, because in some styles of Qigong, we have what are called as dantians, which the dantians are, well, in this system I teach, the lower dantian is your physical, 1 inch below the belly button, heart center, middle dantian, spiritual center, third eye, which are 3 of the 7 chakras. But in some systems of Qigong, your positive and negative, meaning your lower dantian and your middle dantian, are actually your perineum and your Ming Men. So even doing that small practice of that smaller breathing exercise could actually help. And this is also something that will help for spiritual development, tonify the kidneys. It's also another practice that somebody could do. For example, if a man is practicing celibacy for religious or spiritual reasons, it's important to keep on moving that energy. It's a great practice to keep on moving that chi. So going back to too many ejaculations, what happens is that was that?
Said
Christmas?
You said Erasmus.
If you have, people will purposely conserve the energy. So if somebody is conserving they're not having sex to serve God or whatever, spiritual development, they have to know why. And they have to know how to move the energy.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we start to see higher rates, especially in men, of prostate cancer, testicular cancer, those types of things.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, there's so much tension and repression that's held in that lower region of so many people as well. So I think being able to mobilize that energy is a powerful practice for sure. And I want to clarify one thing. So with the tongue on the roof of the mouth, so this closes the gate, right? But is it because in other practices and modalities, it's often recommended that you don't have your tongue on the roof of your mouth because this can create tension? Is that? Can you talk on that at all? Or
okay,
Yep.
So there's different modalities. There's different types of breathing techniques, for example.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. When I was fighting with Kung Lee's fight team, Coach Kung, when I was preparing for a fight, he wanted me to get we would do high altitude training. And I don't know if you've ever done the high altitude training, but when you sprint, it's not that bad. It's when you back off that it feels like you're drowning. So one other way that he would do what we would do is he would have us sprint on the elliptical. I forgot what the setting is. Have a sprint for 30 seconds. Do this for 15 minutes. Sprint for 30 seconds and then back off, shadow box, still moving the feet, shadow box, shadow box. The whole time you have water in your mouth.
Whoa.
You know how hard that is to do that?
Wow.
And the first time I tried doing it, I was single at the time, and there's a cute girl, and I got on the elliptical next to her. I got to minute number 7. I spewed water all over the freaking thing, and she took off. Like, she's like, "Who's this bozo?" Like, so. And the reason why Coach Kung would do that is because you only have 1 minute to recover between rounds. You actually can regulate your chi better by breathing through the nose, inhaling and exhaling through the nose. That's why and there's tribes in Africa where the kids will practice running and sprinting for miles with water in their mouth.
Yeah.
And they're fast. So there are different breathing techniques, but in this specific meditation, and in generally speaking, for the most Qigong practices, the breath is through the nose because we can regulate the flow of chi better when we breathe through the nose.
Yeah. Well, there's other practices, that do that as well. I mean, even just the saying, like, you breathe through the nose, you eat through the mouth. Like, that's it. That's what the nose is meant for, is for breathing. And people who like tape their mouth at night, like, because they're mouth breathers, so they tape their mouth to like condition themselves to breathe through the nose. And I know people that do that as well. I mean, I've done it.
Yeah. So like I said, so Coach Kung would have us do this technique, and it takes a little bit of conditioning to do it, obviously, but it's very powerful, especially if you're doing anything that requires endurance.
Awesome, man. All right, Chris, final question.
Okay.
What is the single most important lesson you've ever learned in your life?
Wow. I would say the single most important lesson is that don't take life too seriously, because and you have to laugh a lot because
Mhm.
you know shit happens. And the Taoists say the difference between the Taoists and the Buddhists is the Buddhists, they say, a lot of times will cultivate themselves in the mountains, right, and live a simple plain life to cultivate their spiritual development. The true Taoists say no. Yes, every once in a while go away to cultivate yourself, but no, stay amongst society, be a part of society, so that way you can give back, but also so that way you can learn. Because a true sage doesn't become a sage by reading a book. A true sage becomes a sage through suffering, and it's now how you suffer and how you handle that suffering that will enlighten you or not. But laughter, I think is the one thing, is not to take yourself too seriously, to be kind to yourself, and things are going to happen. This is part of the journey, and we're meant to grow from it. And the word sin, for example, I think is an overused term. And to me, what it means is to miss the mark. We all miss the mark. And sometimes that affects just us. Sometimes it affects us one day, maybe it'll affect us a lifetime, or sometimes it'll affect the people around us, and sometimes it'll affect nations. The whole idea is that when you miss the mark, is just to try to get back on track. That's the whole idea here. So don't take yourself too seriously. Don't thing, things are going to happen, and laugh a lot. Laugh off a lot of things that come your way, because laughter is really the key for healing. And I know there's some practices that say to do 7 belly laughs every single day. You know, and there's something to that when we talk about longevity. So I would say that's my biggest. And I've had a hard life. I don't know if you know, but they just shot a short film about me, that will be coming out. We'll be hitting the Burbank Film Festival first in September, and then hitting all the other film festivals. And I've had a lot of shit, but also too, I realized that I create a lot of my own shit too, right? Um, that Johnny Cash song "Walk the Line," that's definitely me, because I could definitely be on this side of the fence, and boy, it was like a bright light, like, oh, squirrel, I should go that way. So anyway, so I know that I've created a lot of my own suffering. So I've learned in the process to just be able to sit back, smile at it, and not get too attached.
Beautiful,
Thanks,
man.
man.
Thank you so much for
Yeah, really.
sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, really appreciate you. Really appreciate you coming on. Real quickly, just we'll have links in the show notes, but like anything you have going on besides the film, website that you want to share with our
Yeah.
listeners.
And also, if how can someone begin their qigong journey? What would your recommendations be as well?
Great.
Well, I would recommend joining our Chi Club. It's Monday through Thursday, from 8 to 8:30 in the morning, and you go to thechiclub.com, and you can spell it either way, QIGONG or CHI. And even if you can't join us live, you have the recordings for a week, and so you always have access. If you're, it's really inexpensive. I forget, like I think it's like $30 a month or something like that. But also my YouTube page is Chris Shelton Qigong. In fact, all my handles for TikTok or for Instagram and stuff like that. But on the YouTube page for Chris Shelton Qigong, now we have the 30 days of Qigong on there. So it's like you're taking 30 weeks with me, at my studio in San Jose. So each day I talk about the practice, why you're doing it according to Chinese medicine. Each day builds on top of the practice. My book, Qigong for Self-Refinement, Total Health with the 5 Elements, is a great way to introduce yourself to these practices. And what's funny is that that book also corresponds with that YouTube page. And I'm gently, softly introducing people to the concepts of classical Chinese medicine, while describing the practices and their benefits. So, the YouTube page, joining the Chi Club, and then also we have a teacher training program. So if there's anybody out there, because Qigong is on the rise. Still, there's a lot of people that don't know about it. So I really appreciate you guys having me on your show to talk about this, because a lot of people don't know about it. Um, and but So we do have a teacher training program, and level 1, there's 2 levels. Level 1 is 13 weeks, level 2 is 17 weeks. And I would recommend, if you're somebody that wants to, so if you're somebody that just wants to dive deep, like Chris, I'm tired of these hardships and this suffering over and over again. What can I do pretty quickly? Well, that level one, because it's called a teacher training program, but what we found is that a lot of people take the class for their own personal development. That's because it's going to force you to work on your stuff. There's no way around it. And so we call it the most comprehensive teacher training program out there, because I'm not teaching you this stuff for some kind of woo-woo fantasy or whatever. I'm not teaching you this stuff just because it feels good. I'm teaching you this stuff so that way you can become empowered to take care of your health, and then share this with other people around you. So yeah, and like I said, my second book will be coming out this year. I was just in a movie with Billy Blanks, that should be released on Netflix this year, where I kind of play a cross between Yoda and Mr. Miyagi. So I get to drop some wisdom there. So what's cool is that there's all these little things that are happening. I mean, it's been a lot of hard work. None of this stuff was handed to me, but there's all these little things that are happening that are starting to increase the awareness of these internal arts and just the power of these internal arts.
Chris, man, so inspiring. This conversation has definitely reignited, I guess, my own journey with Qigong, and I'm definitely going to look deeper into what you're offering myself for sure. Highly recommend anyone who else is listening to this and feels inspired to do the same. So much wisdom. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for being here for the truth.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, thanks for promoting these ancient arts, and and also promoting the truth as well too. We need more people like you to spread the word of what's really going on out there in the world, and also what can we do to help to empower and uplift the world.
Absolutely, man. And guys, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time, they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean, fast forward in evolution to a place where we can share our confusions. Yeah, 450 BC, I'm sharing tea with confusion.